What if everything we learned about human civilization was wrong? What if our ancestors were far more advanced than we ever imagined, thousands of years before they were supposed to be? Before we dive into one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what ancient mystery fascinates you most, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss another fascinating history video. You'll want to stick around for what comes next. Imagine this. You're a farmer in southeastern Turkey in 1963. You're walking across your land like you've done 1,000 times before. But today, something catches your eye. Strange stones poking up from the ground. They look oddly shaped, almost like they were carved by human hands. But that couldn't be possible, right? These stones are in the middle of nowhere, far from any known ancient cities. This farmer had just stumbled upon something that would shake the foundations of everything we thought we knew about human history. But he didn't know it yet. In fact, nobody would understand what these stones really meant for another 30 years. Let me take you back even further. Think about what you learned in school about ancient civilizations. You probably heard something like this. First, humans were hunters and gatherers, wandering around, following animal herds, eating whatever they could find. Then, about 10,000 years ago, they figured out farming. They learned to plant seeds and grow crops. This discovery changed everything. It meant people could stay in one place instead of constantly moving. Villages formed, then towns, then cities. And once people had cities, they could focus on other things besides just finding food. They built temples, they created art, they developed writing. Civilization was born. This story makes sense, right? You need food security before you can build anything impressive. You need villages before you can have religion. You need to settle down before you can create monuments. It's logical. It's simple. And for over 100 years, this is what every archaeologist, every historian, every teacher believed. But Göbekli Tepe says something completely different. This site whispers a different story, one that turns our neat timeline upside down and inside out. Based on the evidence we've uncovered, this could mean that our entire understanding of human development needs to be rewritten. Göbekli Tepe is located in Turkey, near the border with Syria. If you look at a map, find the modern city of Şanlıurfa. The site sits on top of a mountain ridge about 9 miles away from that city. The name Göbekli Tepe means pot-belly hill in Turkish, which sounds funny for something so important, but that's exactly what it looked like before excavation, just a rounded hill covered with broken rocks. Here's what makes this place so special. Göbekli Tepe is the oldest known temple complex in the world. When I say oldest, I'm not talking about 100 years older than we expected. I'm not even talking about 1,000 years older. This place is approximately 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It's about 7,000 years older than the pyramids of Egypt. It dates back to around 9,500 BCE, which puts it at roughly 11,500 years old. Let that sink in for a moment. 11,500 years. That's not just ancient, that's prehistory. That's before written language. That's before pottery. That's before metal tools. And yet, the people who built Göbekli Tepe created something that would impress engineers today. But here's the real kicker, the part that makes archaeologists stay awake at night. Based on what we know about the tools and evidence found at the site, we can reasonably assume that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers, not farmers, not settled city dwellers. These were people who supposedly spent all their time just trying to survive, hunting animals and gathering plants. According to our old understanding of history, they shouldn't have had the organization, the resources, or the motivation to build something this complex. Yet they did. The site consists of massive stone pillars arranged in circles. These aren't small rocks we're talking about. Some of these pillars weigh up to 10 tons. That's 20,000 pounds. That's about the weight of a large elephant or a school bus. And they didn't just place these massive stones on the ground. They carved them, shaped them, decorated them with intricate designs of animals and mysterious symbols. How did they move these stones without wheels, without domesticated animals to pull them, without metal tools to shape them? How did they organize the workforce needed for such a project when they supposedly had no permanent settlements? These questions have been puzzling researchers since serious excavation began in the 1990s. And here's something that might blow your mind even more. What we've excavated so far represents only 5% of the entire site. Ground-penetrating radar shows that there are at least 20 more circles of pillars still buried underground. 20 more! Each one potentially holding new discoveries, new mysteries, new challenges to what we thought we knew. Think about what this means. For generations, we've told a specific story about human progress. We've said first comes farming, then comes settlement, then comes religion and monumental architecture. It's a straight line. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. But Göbekli Tepe says something completely different. This site whispers a different story, one that turns our neat timeline upside down and inside out. Based on the evidence we've uncovered, this could mean that our entire understanding of human development needs to be rewritten.
The story of Göbekli Tepe is still being written. Every season of excavation brings new discoveries. Every new analysis of the stones and the artifacts found there adds another piece to the puzzle. But even with what we know now, this site has already changed archaeology forever. It's forced us to question our assumptions. It's made us realize that ancient people were far more capable than we gave them credit for. So who were these mysterious builders? What were they trying to accomplish? Why did they put so much effort into creating these massive stone circles? And perhaps most mysteriously, why did they eventually bury the entire complex, hiding it from the world for thousands of years? In this video, we're going to explore all of these questions. We'll look at the evidence, examine the theories, and try to understand what Göbekli Tepe tells us about our ancestors and ourselves. We'll see how a single site in Turkey has rewritten the story of human civilization. And we'll discover why this place matters not just to archaeologists, but to anyone who's ever wondered about where we come from and how we got here. Before we continue, remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The ancient world is full of incredible stories, and I'm here to share them with you. Now, let's dig deeper into the discovery that changed everything.
Every great discovery has a story, and Göbekli Tepe's story is filled with missed opportunities, lucky breaks, and one very determined archaeologist who refused to give up. Let's start with that farmer I mentioned earlier. In 1963, a local farmer was working his fields on top of what locals called Potbelly Hill. The area was known for having lots of broken stones scattered across the surface. People in the region had noticed these stones for generations. They stuck up from the ground at odd angles. They were clearly shaped by human hands, but nobody really thought much about them. After all, the area had been inhabited for thousands of years. Old stones were everywhere. This particular farmer, though, found something that caught his attention. As he cleared part of his land, he uncovered what looked like a shaped stone buried in the dirt. It had a strange T-shaped top. Curious, he reported his find to local authorities. This information eventually made its way to a team of archaeologists from the University of Chicago and Istanbul University, who were surveying the region. The team visited the site. They looked at the stones, they noted the area, and then they made a decision that would delay one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the century. They concluded that the stones were probably from a medieval cemetery. Nothing special, not worth excavating. They moved on. For 30 years, Göbekli Tepe sat there, its secrets still buried. Farmers continued to work the land around it, the stones continued to weather in the sun and rain, and the archaeological world had no idea what they were missing. Enter Klaus Schmidt. This German archaeologist was working in Turkey in 1994, conducting a survey of prehistoric sites in the region. Schmidt had spent years studying the Neolithic period, the time when humans transitioned from hunting and gathering to farming and settlement. He knew the area around Sanliurfa was important. Ancient texts mentioned it. Other archaeological sites nearby suggested significant human activity in the distant past. Schmidt came across the old survey reports that mentioned Potbelly Hill. Something about the description caught his eye. Medieval cemetery? He wasn't so sure. The location was odd for a cemetery. The description of the stones didn't quite fit. He decided to take a look for himself. When Schmidt first visited Göbekli Tepe, he saw what others had seen, a hill covered with broken limestone and flint. But Schmidt's trained eye noticed something the earlier team had missed. The stones weren't scattered randomly. There was a pattern. The hill itself was artificial, a tell, which is a mound created by thousands of years of human habitation and construction. And those T-shaped stones, they weren't gravestones. They were something far older and far more significant. Schmidt later said that within the first minute of seeing the site, he knew he had found something extraordinary. Based on the flint tools scattered on the surface, he could reasonably infer this was from the Neolithic period, not medieval times. The size and shape of the stones suggested monumental architecture, and the location on top of a mountain rather than near water sources or good farmland implied something special, perhaps ceremonial. He started excavating that same year. What he found in those first seasons of digging exceeded even his most optimistic expectations. The first thing his team uncovered was one of the massive stone circles. 2 huge T-shaped pillars stood in the center, surrounded by smaller pillars arranged in a circle. These weren't rough stones. They were carefully carved, shaped, and smoothed. Some stood 16 feet tall. Their surfaces were carved with reliefs of animals, foxes, lions, snakes, vultures, scorpions, and many others. But here's where things got really interesting. Schmidt and his team started finding flint tools near the stones. These tools could be dated, and the dates they were getting back from the laboratory were shocking. 9,000 years before the present, 10,000 years. These weren't medieval. They weren't even from the Bronze Age or the early agricultural period. This site dated to the very beginning of the Neolithic Revolution, the time when humans first started experimenting with farming. Actually, the evidence suggested something even more surprising. Based on what we know from similar sites in the region, we can assume the earliest parts of Göbekli Tepe were built before farming had really taken hold. The bones found at the site were all from wild animals, not domesticated ones. There was no evidence of cultivated grain. This could imply that the builders were still primarily hunter-gatherers. Schmidt was convinced he had found the world's oldest temple. And as excavation continued year after year, every new discovery supported that conclusion. The team uncovered multiple circular structures, each one containing those distinctive T-shaped pillars. They found elaborate carvings everywhere. They discovered that the ancient builders had actually quarried the stones from bedrock nearby, carving them out in one piece and then somehow transporting them to their final positions. They found evidence of feasting, large amounts of animal bones suggesting communal meals. Word of the discovery began to spread through the archaeological community. At first, many scholars were skeptical. A monumental temple built by hunter-gatherers? Impossible. It went against everything they had been taught. The dates must be wrong, some said, or maybe it was built by early farmers and the evidence of farming just hadn't been found yet. But as more evidence accumulated, the skeptics had to reconsider. The dating was solid. Multiple methods all pointed to the same time frame, approximately 9,500 to 8,000 BCE. The lack of farming evidence wasn't because archaeologists hadn't looked hard enough. It was because farming wasn't being practiced there yet. This site really was what Schmidt claimed, a massive ceremonial complex built by hunter-gatherers. This realization sent shockwaves through the field. Textbooks would need to be rewritten. Theories about the development of civilization would need to be reconsidered. The simple straight-line narrative of human progress was no longer sustainable. Schmidt devoted the rest of his life to excavating and understanding Göbekli Tepe. He worked at the site every year, slowly and carefully uncovering its secrets. He gave lectures around the world explaining why this site was so important.
He trained new archaeologists to continue the work. Sadly, Schmidt passed away in 2014, but not before he had revealed enough of Göbekli Tepe to change archaeology forever. Today, excavation continues under new directors. The site is now recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's protected and studied by teams from around the world, and every season brings new discoveries. But it's worth pausing to think about what almost happened. If Klaus Schmidt hadn't decided to check out that old survey report, Göbekli Tepe might still be just a rocky hill where farmers grew their crops. The stones would still be there, slowly weathering away, their secrets still buried. We would still be teaching that old simple story about civilization. Farming first, then everything else. One person's curiosity and determination changed that. Schmidt saw what others missed. He asked the right questions. He pushed forward even when the discoveries seemed too incredible to be true. And because of that, we now know our ancestors were capable of things we never imagined. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe reminds us how much we still don't know about our past. It shows us that there are still mysteries buried in the ground, waiting for someone curious enough to dig them up. And it teaches us that we should always be willing to question what we think we know, because the truth might be far more interesting than the stories we've been telling ourselves.
Let's talk about dates. I know that might sound boring, but trust me, the dates at Göbekli Tepe are anything but boring. In fact, they're revolutionary. When archaeologists first started seriously excavating Göbekli Tepe in the mid-1990s, they needed to figure out exactly how old the site was. This is standard practice in archaeology. You can't understand a site's importance until you know when it was built and used. So the team collected samples for dating. There are several ways to date ancient sites. One of the most common is called radiocarbon dating. Here's how it works in simple terms. All living things contain a special type of carbon called carbon-14. When a plant or animal dies, that carbon-14 starts to break down at a steady, predictable rate. By measuring how much carbon-14 is left in something, like a piece of charcoal or a bone, scientists can figure out how long ago that plant or animal died. The team at Göbekli Tepe found charcoal in the mortar between the stones. They found animal bones in the fill around the structures. They found organic material in the soil layers. All of this could be carbon dated. So they sent samples to laboratories and waited for the results. When those results came back, the archaeologists had to check them again. The dates seemed impossible. The earliest phases of construction at Göbekli Tepe dated to around 9500 BCE. That's approximately 11,500 years ago, give or take a few hundred years. To put that in perspective, let's compare it to other famous ancient sites. The Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt was built around 2560 BCE. That makes it about 4,500 years old. Stonehenge in England was constructed in stages, with the main stone circle going up around 2500 BCE, also about 4,500 years old. The oldest parts of the Sumerian city of Uruk, often called one of the world's first true cities, date to around 4000 BCE, making them about 6,000 years old. Göbekli Tepe is roughly twice as old as any of these sites. It's older than the invention of writing. It's older than the wheel. It's older than pottery in this region. This could suggest that the builders accomplished all of this with stone tools, since metalworking hadn't been invented yet. But here's what really made archaeologists' heads spin. According to the traditional timeline of human development, Göbekli Tepe shouldn't exist at all. Let me explain that timeline I mentioned earlier. For most of the 20th century, archaeologists believed human civilization developed in a specific order. First came the Paleolithic period, or Old Stone Age. This lasted for millions of years. During this time, humans were hunter-gatherers. They moved from place to place following food sources. They lived in small groups. They had simple tools made of stone, wood, and bone. They didn't build permanent structures beyond basic shelters. Then, around 10,000 BCE in the Middle East, the Neolithic Revolution began. This is when humans started experimenting with agriculture. They learned to plant seeds and grow crops. They domesticated animals. This agricultural lifestyle required them to stay in one place to tend their fields, so they built permanent villages. These villages grew into towns, then cities. Once people had reliable food sources and permanent settlements, they could develop more complex societies. Some people could specialize in jobs other than food production. They could become craftspeople, priests, builders, artists. This specialization led to more advanced technology, more organized religion, and eventually monumental architecture like temples and pyramids. That's the traditional timeline. It makes logical sense. You need to solve the food problem before you can do anything else. You need permanent villages before you can have organized religion. You need writing and complex social organization before you can build monuments. Göbekli Tepe throws this entire timeline into chaos. Based on all the evidence we've gathered, this site appears to have been built before agriculture became widespread in the region. The animal bones found there are all from wild species, not domesticated ones. There's no evidence of cultivated grain or permanent housing. This could imply the builders were still living as hunter-gatherers.
Yet these supposed hunter-gatherers built something that required enormous organization, planning, and labor. Let's think about what it would take to create just one of those stone circles. First, you need to find the right kind of stone. The builders of Göbekli Tepe used limestone, which they quarried from the bedrock about 100 meters away from the site. They had to identify good stone, stone that wouldn't crack or crumble when they worked it. Next, they had to cut the stone out of the bedrock. Remember, this is before metal tools. Based on the evidence at the site, we can reasonably assume they used stone tools for this work. They would pound and chip away at the bedrock until they had created a massive T-shaped pillar. Some of these pillars are over 16 feet tall and weigh up to 10 tons. Then came the really hard part, moving these massive stones. 10 tons is incredibly heavy. How do you move something that weighs 20,000 pounds without wheels, without metal tools, without domesticated animals to pull it? Researchers estimate this could have required hundreds of people working together, using ropes and wooden levers and lots of muscle power. Once they got the stone to the construction site, they had to position it upright. This meant digging a deep hole, sliding the base of the pillar into it, and then lifting the stone vertical. Again, this would require dozens of people all working in coordination. And we haven't even talked about the carving yet. Those pillars aren't just big rocks. They're covered in detailed reliefs of animals and abstract symbols. Someone had to spend hours and hours carving those designs using stone tools. The level of craftsmanship is remarkable. All of this requires organization on a massive scale. You need a large workforce. You need people to plan the construction. You need people to provide food for all these workers. You need some kind of authority or motivation to bring everyone together and keep them working toward the common goal. Traditional archaeology said that hunter-gatherers couldn't do this. They didn't have the social organization. They were too busy finding food. They didn't have the concept of permanent monuments because they didn't stay in one place long enough to build them. But the dates don't lie. The evidence is clear. Göbekli Tepe was built approximately 11,500 years ago by people who hadn't yet fully adopted agriculture. This means our traditional understanding of human development was wrong, or at least incomplete. This discovery forced archaeologists to reconsider their assumptions. Maybe hunter-gatherers were more organized than we thought. Maybe they had more free time than we assumed. Maybe their society was more complex than the simple picture we had painted. Or maybe, just maybe, we had the whole thing backwards. Maybe it wasn't agriculture that led to civilization. Maybe it was the other way around. This is the theory that Klaus Schmidt and others proposed based on the evidence at Göbekli Tepe. They suggested that maybe religion, the desire to create sacred spaces and gather for ceremonies, came first. Maybe groups of hunter-gatherers were already coming together for seasonal gatherings, for rituals, for shared experiences. And maybe building a permanent place for these gatherings, a place like Göbekli Tepe, created the need for more reliable food sources to feed all these people. In other words, building the temple might have led to agriculture, not the other way around. The need to support the people who built and used Göbekli Tepe could have motivated them to start experimenting with growing crops and domesticating animals. Civilization might have started with the spirit, not the stomach. This theory is still debated. Not all archaeologists accept it. But what's undeniable is that Göbekli Tepe has broken our simple timeline of human development. It's shown us that the path from hunter-gatherer to civilized society wasn't a straight line. It was messy, complex, and full of surprises. The dates at Göbekli Tepe teach us an important lesson. The past is always more complicated than we think. Just when we think we've figured out how something worked, new evidence appears that makes us question everything. And that's not a bad thing. That's how we learn. That's how our understanding grows and becomes more accurate. Göbekli Tepe shouldn't exist according to our old theories, but it does exist. And rather than trying to make it fit our theories, we need to change our theories to fit the evidence. That's what good science does. It adapts. It learns. It gets better.
Let's get up close and personal with the most impressive feature of Göbekli Tepe, the pillars themselves. These aren't your average rocks. They're engineering marvels that challenge everything we thought we knew about what Stone Age people could accomplish. Picture this. You're standing in one of the circular enclosures at Göbekli Tepe. All around you are these massive T-shaped pillars arranged in a circle. They tower above you, some reaching 16 feet high, which is about the height of a 2-story building. Each one is a single piece of limestone, carved from the bedrock and somehow transported to this spot. The T-shape is distinctive and clearly intentional. The top of the T is horizontal, like a head, and the vertical part forms a body. This could suggest the pillars represent stylized human figures. Some researchers interpret them as abstract representations of people, perhaps ancestors or spiritual beings. The horizontal top might represent arms stretched out to the sides, or it could symbolize a head. But here's what makes these pillars truly remarkable: their size and weight. The larger pillars weigh between 10 and 15 tons. That's 20,000 to 30,000 pounds. To put that in perspective, a large African elephant weighs about 12,000 pounds, so some of these pillars weigh more than 2 full-grown elephants. And remember, the people moving these stones didn't have wheels, they didn't have metal tools, they didn't have cranes or pulleys. Based on what we know about the technology available at the time, they likely used stone tools, wooden rollers or sledges, and lots of human muscle power. Archaeologists have found the quarry where these stones were cut. It's located on a limestone plateau about 100 meters from the main structures. And here's something incredible. They found a pillar still lying in the quarry, not yet removed from the bedrock. This unfinished pillar is even larger than the ones that were successfully installed. It measures about 23 feet long and weighs an estimated 50 tons. Think about that. 50 tons. That's 100,000 pounds. That's about 8 elephants. And someone 11,000 years ago started carving this massive stone out of solid rock with the intention of moving it and standing it upright. For some reason, they never finished. Maybe the stone cracked. Maybe they realized it was too heavy. Maybe whatever authority or motivation was driving the construction came to an end. But that abandoned pillar tells us something important. The builders were ambitious. They were pushing the limits of what was possible. So how did they do it? How did they cut, move, and position these enormous stones? Let's start with the cutting. The builders used stone tools, probably made from flint, which is very hard and can be shaped into sharp edges. They would have used these tools to pound and chip away at the limestone, slowly separating the pillar from the bedrock. This process is called quarrying, and it requires incredible patience and skill. Based on experiments that modern archaeologists have conducted, we can estimate this process would have taken many people many weeks of steady work. You can't rush it. If you hit the stone wrong, you might crack it and ruin the whole thing. You have to be careful, methodical, and persistent. Once the pillar was free from the bedrock, the real challenge began: moving it. Researchers have proposed several theories about how this might have been accomplished. The most likely explanation involves a large workforce using ropes and wooden sledges or rollers. Here's how it could have worked.
First, you'd need to get the pillar onto some kind of movable platform, probably a wooden sledge. With enough people pulling on ropes and using wooden levers, you could slowly shift the stone onto this platform. Then you'd need teams of people to pull the sledge, possibly placing wooden rollers underneath it to help it slide more easily over the ground. Experiments suggest you'd need at least several hundred people working together to move a 10-ton stone this way. Everyone would have to pull at the same time, in the same direction, responding to coordinated signals. This implies a level of organization and leadership that we don't usually associate with hunter-gatherer societies. The distance from the quarry to the construction site is about 100 meters, or roughly 330 feet. It sounds like not much, but when you're moving tens of thousands of pounds of stone with Stone Age technology, it's a massive undertaking. Based on modern experiments, this could take days or even weeks for each pillar. Once they got the pillar to its destination, they had to put it in position. This meant digging a deep hole in the limestone bedrock, sliding the base of the pillar into it, and then raising the stone to vertical. Archaeologists have found that some of the pillar bases are set more than 6 feet deep into the limestone. Raising a multi-ton pillar to vertical is incredibly dangerous. If it falls the wrong way, people could be killed. The stone itself could shatter. You need careful planning, steady execution, and probably some kind of temporary support structure to help control the movement.
One theory suggests they might have built earthen ramps around the hole, allowing them to slide the pillar in at an angle and then slowly raise it upright using ropes and wooden levers. Others think they might have used a pivoting technique, where the base of the pillar is positioned at the edge of the hole and then the pillar is rotated upward using the edge of the hole as a fulcrum. Either way, this would require incredible coordination and strength from dozens or even hundreds of people. One person pulling too hard or not hard enough at the wrong moment could spell disaster. What's particularly impressive is the precision they achieved. The pillars aren't just jammed into holes, they're carefully positioned. The circular arrangements are remarkably regular. The spacing between pillars is consistent. This suggests careful planning and measurement, not just random placement. And here's another detail that shows the skill of these ancient builders. Many of the pillars have carved features that need to be oriented in specific directions. For example, if a pillar has a carved fox on one side, that side needs to face inward toward the center of the circle, not outward or sideways. This means when they were positioning the pillar, they had to rotate it to exactly the right orientation before setting it in place. Try doing that with a 20,000-pound stone using only ropes and wooden tools. The 2 central pillars in each enclosure are even more impressive. They're generally larger than the outer pillars, and they're positioned in the exact center of the circle. Some of them have carved arms on their sides, reinforcing the interpretation that they represent human-like figures. If you were standing in the middle of an ancient enclosure, these 2 massive pillars would dominate your view, towering above you like silent sentries. What were they for? Why go to all this effort to create these massive stone circles? We'll explore the theories about the site's purpose in a later section, but for now, let's just appreciate the sheer engineering accomplishment. These people didn't have engineering schools. They didn't have textbooks explaining leverage and weight distribution. They didn't have computer models to help them plan. Everything they knew, they learned through trial and error, through experience, through watching what worked and what didn't. This suggests a society with accumulated knowledge passed down from one generation to the next. Someone figured out how to split limestone from bedrock effectively. Someone else figured out the best way to move heavy stones. Another person understood how to dig holes deep enough and wide enough to support these massive pillars. And someone had to coordinate all these people and skills to create a coherent structure. The pillars of Göbekli Tepe represent more than just impressive engineering. They represent human ambition, creativity, and the ability to work together toward a common goal. They show us that our ancestors 11,000 years ago weren't primitive. They were intelligent, capable, and determined. They also raise intriguing questions. Why invest so much effort into moving and erecting these stones? What motivated these people to take on such challenging projects? The answer has to be something important, something that mattered deeply to them. You don't spend weeks or months moving 20-ton rocks for something trivial. This brings us to another fascinating aspect of the pillars, their decorations. Because these stones aren't just impressive for their size and the engineering required to move them, they're also covered in elaborate carvings that provide clues about the beliefs, the environment, and the world view of the people who created them. Before we explore those carvings in detail, take a moment to imagine yourself as one of the builders. You've spent weeks helping to cut a massive pillar from the quarry. You've pulled on ropes until your hands are blistered and bleeding. You've watched as hundreds of your fellow workers coordinated their efforts to slowly, inch by inch, move this enormous stone to its destination. You've held your breath as the pillar was raised upright, knowing that one mistake could crush someone beneath tons of rock. And now it stands, towering above you, a testament to what humans can accomplish when they work together. You might not understand the physics of what you've done. You might not know the precise techniques you've used, but you know deep in your bones that you and your people have created something extraordinary. That feeling, that sense of accomplishment and awe connects us 11,000 years to those ancient builders. They were human, just like us. They had the same capacity for wonder, for determination, for creating something that would outlast them. And the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, still standing today, prove they succeeded.
Now let's talk about what makes these pillars even more special: the art carved into their surfaces. The stones at Göbekli Tepe aren't just big and impressively engineered. They're covered with intricate carvings that give us a window into the minds of the people who created them. The carvings fall into two main categories: animals and abstract symbols. Let's start with the animals, because they're the most obvious and the most striking. The pillars and walls at Göbekli Tepe feature detailed reliefs of a wide variety of creatures. We're talking about foxes, gazelles, snakes, scorpions, vultures, cranes, wild boars, and even insects. The most common animals carved on the stones are dangerous ones: snakes, scorpions, spiders, and predatory birds like vultures. Lions appear on some pillars, showing that these fierce predators lived in the region at the time. The level of detail in these carvings is impressive, especially considering they were made with stone tools. You can see the individual feathers on the vultures. The scales on the snakes are clearly rendered. The scorpions are shown with their tails curved up, ready to strike. These aren't crude stick figure drawings. They're carefully observed and skillfully executed representations of real animals. What makes the animal carvings particularly interesting is what they tell us about the environment. 11,000 years ago, this region of Turkey was very different from today. Based on the animals depicted and other evidence we've found, we can infer it was wetter and more lush. There were forests where now there's mostly grassland. The carved animals give us a snapshot of an ecosystem that no longer exists in quite the same way. But why these particular animals? Why focus so heavily on dangerous creatures? This is where we move from observation into interpretation. Different researchers have different theories. One possibility is that these animals had spiritual significance. Many cultures throughout history have associated certain animals with gods, spirits, or supernatural forces. In ancient Egypt, cats were sacred. Native American tribes often had totem animals that represented their clans. This could suggest the people at Göbekli Tepe might have had similar beliefs, with different animals representing different powers or principles. Another theory focuses on the dangerous nature of many of the carved animals. Snakes, scorpions, and wild boars all pose real threats to humans. Vultures are associated with death as they feed on corpses. This could imply that Göbekli Tepe was somehow connected to death rituals or beliefs about the afterlife. Maybe the dangerous animals represented the journey to the next world, or the challenges the dead had to face. Some researchers have suggested the carvings might represent constellations. Ancient peoples often saw patterns in the stars and associated them with animals or mythological figures.
Some of the arrangements of animals on the pillars, when mapped out, do bear a resemblance to star patterns visible from Turkey 11,000 years ago. This has led to speculation that Göbekli Tepe might have served as an ancient astronomical observatory, with the pillars and their carvings acting as a kind of stone calendar or star map. However, it's important to note that these interpretations are speculative. We don't have written records from the people who built Göbekli Tepe. We can't ask them what the carvings meant. We can only look at the evidence and make educated guesses based on what we know about human cultures and symbolism. What we can say with more confidence is that the carvings were important. You don't spend hours and hours laboriously chipping designs into hard limestone with stone tools unless those designs matter. The sheer amount of work invested in these carvings tells us they meant something significant to the people who made them. Let's talk about the abstract symbols. Mixed in with the animal carvings are various geometric shapes and abstract designs. There are H-shaped symbols, cup marks, and various other carved shapes whose meanings are completely mysterious to us. Some pillars feature what look like handbags or containers hanging from the arms of the T-shaped figures. These appear on multiple pillars, which suggests they weren't random decorations, but had some specific meaning. What could they represent? Storage containers? Ritual objects? Offerings to the gods? We simply don't know. But the fact that they appear repeatedly implies they were meaningful symbols in the culture that created them. One of the most intriguing discoveries is what appears to be the oldest known pictograph, or picture writing. On one of the pillars, researchers found a sequence of carved symbols that some interpret as an early form of communication, perhaps a precursor to actual writing. If true, this would push back the origins of symbolic communication even further than we thought. However, this interpretation is controversial, and not all researchers agree that these symbols represent writing. What's particularly fascinating is that different enclosures feature different styles and combinations of animals. Enclosure A is dominated by images of foxes. Enclosure B features many snakes and boars. Enclosure C has numerous gazelles. This variation suggests each enclosure might have been associated with different clans, totems, or spiritual concepts. Based on this pattern, we might infer that different groups were responsible for different structures, each expressing their own identity through their choice of animal imagery. The pillars also show evidence of modification over time. Some carvings appear to have been added later, carved over or around earlier designs. This tells us the site was used over a long period, possibly centuries, with each generation adding their own marks and meanings to the stones. One particularly mysterious feature is the presence of human figures among the animal carvings. These are rare, but when they appear, they're usually headless. Yes, headless. There are several carved reliefs showing human bodies without heads. Some researchers interpret this as evidence of ritual decapitation, possibly associated with death rituals or ancestor worship. Others think it might be symbolic, representing the separation of the physical body from the spirit or soul.
There's also evidence that some of the pillars might have been dressed in actual clothing at some point. Carved details on some pillars suggest belts or loincloths. There are also holes drilled into some pillars at regular intervals, which could have been used to attach real fabric or leather garments. This raises the intriguing possibility that the pillars, which we now see as bare stone, might once have been decorated with perishable materials that have long since decayed. Imagine these structures in their prime, with colorfully painted or fabric-draped pillars standing in circles, creating an even more impressive and mysterious atmosphere. The carved surfaces show tool marks that tell us about the carving process. Archaeologists can see the pattern of strikes where the ancient carvers chipped away at the stone. Some areas are smoothly polished, while others are left rougher. This variation in finish might be intentional, creating different textures for different effects, or it might simply represent different skill levels among the workers. What strikes many visitors to Göbekli Tepe is how modern the art feels. These carvings don't look primitive or crude. They show observation, skill, and artistic sensibility. The animals are recognizable and dynamic. The proportions are generally accurate. The compositions are often balanced and aesthetically pleasing. This challenges another assumption we often make about ancient people, that they were less sophisticated in their thinking and expression. The art at Göbekli Tepe proves that humans 11,000 years ago had the same cognitive abilities we do. They could observe their world carefully. They could translate what they saw into symbolic representation. They had aesthetic preferences and artistic standards. The carvings also hint at a complex belief system. Whether these were religious symbols, astronomical markers, clan totems, or something else entirely, they represent abstract thinking. The people who created them weren't just concerned with survival. They were thinking about meaning, about identity, about their place in the cosmos. Every carved animal, every abstract symbol, every decorative element is a message from the past. Unfortunately, we don't have the code to fully decipher that message. We can guess, we can theorize, we can compare these symbols to those used by other ancient cultures, but without written explanations or living practitioners of the belief system, much of the meaning remains locked in the stone. That mystery, however, is part of what makes Göbekli Tepe so captivating. These carvings ask us questions we can't fully answer. They remind us that there are depths to human history we haven't yet plumbed. They suggest that ancient people had rich inner lives, complex thoughts, and sophisticated symbolic systems that we're only beginning to glimpse. As excavation continues and more pillars are uncovered, we'll likely find more carvings, more symbols, more clues about what all of this meant to the people who created it. Each new discovery has the potential to shed light on these mysteries or to deepen them further. What we can say for certain is that the people who built Göbekli Tepe weren't just building, they were communicating. They were expressing ideas and beliefs. They were creating meaning. And although we may never fully understand what they were trying to say, the very fact that they went to such lengths to say it tells us something profound about the human spirit.
So who were these people? Who were the builders of Göbekli Tepe? What were their lives like? These questions are at the heart of why this site is so revolutionary. Let's start with what we know for certain. The people who built the earliest parts of Göbekli Tepe lived approximately 11,500 years ago, during the pre-pottery Neolithic A period. The name tells you something important: pre-pottery. These people hadn't invented pottery yet. They were still in the Stone Age, using tools made from stone, wood, and bone. Based on the evidence found at the site and in the surrounding region, we can make some reasonable assumptions about their lifestyle. They were primarily hunter-gatherers, meaning they got their food by hunting wild animals and gathering wild plants. They hadn't yet adopted full-scale agriculture, though they may have been experimenting with managing certain plants. The animal bones found at Göbekli Tepe are all from wild species. There's no evidence of domesticated sheep, goats, or cattle. The bones are primarily from gazelles and wild cattle called aurochs, along with some wild boar and other game animals. This tells us the people were hunting for their meat, not raising livestock. There's also no evidence of permanent housing at Göbekli Tepe itself. The site appears to have been purely ceremonial or ritual in nature. The people came here for specific purposes, but they didn't live here year-round. So where did they live? This is where things get interesting. The region around Göbekli Tepe shows evidence of seasonal camps and temporary settlements. Based on what we know about similar hunter-gatherer societies, we can infer that these people probably moved throughout the year, following game herds and gathering seasonal plants. They might have had regular routes and favored camping spots, but they didn't build permanent villages. Yet they built Göbekli Tepe, which is definitely permanent. How do we reconcile this? How could mobile hunter-gatherers create such a massive fixed structure? One theory is that different groups of people came together at certain times of the year. Maybe there were seasonal gatherings, times when multiple bands would meet at agreed-upon locations. These gatherings might have been for trading, for finding marriage partners, for sharing information, or for communal rituals. Göbekli Tepe could have been the site of such gatherings.
Its location on top of the hill, visible from a distance, would make it an ideal meeting place. Groups traveling through the region would be able to see it and navigate toward it. And if multiple groups were gathering there regularly, it would make sense to invest in creating a permanent structure for their meetings and ceremonies. This interpretation suggests a level of social organization that surprises many people. We tend to think of hunter-gatherers as living in small, isolated bands with little contact with outsiders. But the existence of Göbekli Tepe implies networks of communication and cooperation across a wide region. Different groups had to agree on the location. They had to coordinate their efforts in building the structures. They had to maintain the site over time. How many people would it take to build Göbekli Tepe? Archaeologists have tried to estimate this. Moving a single 10-ton pillar, as we discussed earlier, might require several hundred people. The entire complex has dozens of pillars. Based on these calculations, we can reasonably infer that hundreds or even thousands of people were involved in the construction over time. Where did all these people come from? The region around Göbekli Tepe is fairly large, but it's not infinitely big. To support hundreds of people gathering at one place, even temporarily, you need adequate food and water in the area. Fortunately, 11,000 years ago, this region was much more fertile than it is today. Based on pollen analysis and other environmental evidence, we know the area was wetter and more vegetated. There were forests of oak and pistachio trees. Wild cereal grains grew abundantly. Game was plentiful. This could have supported a relatively dense population of hunter-gatherers, at least by pre-agricultural standards. But here's another puzzle. These people weren't just building, they were also feasting. Excavations at Göbekli Tepe have uncovered huge quantities of animal bones, far more than a small group could consume. The bones show signs of butchering and cooking. Some are burned, others show cut marks from stone tools. This evidence suggests large communal meals, feasts where many people came together to eat. Some researchers estimate that single feast events might have involved slaughtering and cooking dozens of animals. This implies not just occasional gatherings, but significant celebrations or rituals that brought together substantial numbers of people. Who organized all this? Who decided when gatherings would happen? Who coordinated the construction work? Hunter-gatherer societies are often egalitarian, without strong hierarchies or formal leaders. But building something like Göbekli Tepe requires organization and leadership. Some researchers propose that shamans or priests might have played this role. These would be individuals with special spiritual knowledge or authority who could motivate and coordinate the workforce. The elaborate symbolism carved on the pillars supports the idea that religion or spirituality was central to the site's purpose. If people believed they were building something sacred, something that pleased the gods or honored the ancestors, that might provide the motivation needed for such a massive undertaking. Another theory suggests that the desire to build Göbekli Tepe might have actually changed these societies in fundamental ways. Maybe the need to feed the workers and maintain the site led to more systematic food production. Maybe the regular gatherings created stronger social bonds between groups, leading to more permanent alliances. Maybe the coordination required for construction taught people organizational skills they then applied to other areas of life. In other words, Göbekli Tepe might not have been built by a society that was already complex and organized. Instead, the process of building it might have helped make the society more complex and organized. This is a fascinating idea because it suggests that monumental architecture wasn't just a result of social complexity, it was a cause of it.
What about the actual builders? What skills did they have? Obviously, they were skilled stoneworkers, able to quarry, move, and carve massive limestone blocks. They understood structural principles, knowing how deep to dig holes and how to position pillars so they would stand stable for thousands of years. They were artists, capable of creating detailed and expressive carvings. But they were also just people. They got hungry and tired. They probably argued sometimes about how to do things. They might have had accidents during construction. They fell in love, had families, told stories around campfires.
They were as human as we are, with the same range of emotions and experiences. One of the most profound realizations from Göbekli Tepe is that these ancient hunter-gatherers weren't primitive. That word primitive suggests simple, unsophisticated, less than fully human. But the people who built Göbekli Tepe were none of those things. They were intelligent, creative, organized, and capable of abstract thought and long-term planning. They had culture, they had beliefs, they had social networks and relationships, they had accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. They were, in every meaningful way, just as human as people living today. The main difference between them and us isn't intelligence or capability, it's simply knowledge and technology. They didn't know about metallurgy or writing or engines, but given their level of knowledge and technology, they accomplished something remarkable. This should make us think differently about ancient people in general. How many other sites or artifacts have we dismissed as primitive when they actually represent sophisticated thinking and skill? How many assumptions have we made about the past that turn out to be wrong? Göbekli Tepe teaches us humility. It reminds us that we don't know everything about our ancestors. It challenges us to look at ancient peoples with fresh eyes, to credit them with the full range of human capabilities, and to be open to being surprised by what they accomplished. The builders of Göbekli Tepe are gone, their names forgotten, their individual stories lost to time, but what they created remains, speaking across the millennia, telling us that humans have always been capable of greatness, that the spark of creativity and ambition that drives us today burned just as bright 11,000 years ago.
We've talked about what Göbekli Tepe is and who built it. Now let's tackle the biggest question of all. Why? Why did they build it? What was Göbekli Tepe actually for? This question has sparked intense debate among researchers. Different archaeologists have proposed different theories, and the truth might involve elements of several of them. Let's explore the main possibilities. The most widely accepted theory is that Göbekli Tepe was a temple, a sacred space for religious or spiritual rituals. This interpretation comes from several lines of evidence. First, there's the location. Göbekli Tepe sits on top of a mountain ridge, visible from miles around. This elevated position isn't practical for everyday activities. It's not near a river or good farmland. It's not an easy place to get water. But it's a dramatic location, one that would feel closer to the sky, to the gods, to whatever spiritual powers these people believed in. Many cultures throughout history have built their most sacred sites on mountaintops for exactly this reason. Second, there's the symbolism. The elaborate animal carvings, the abstract symbols, the T-shaped pillars that might represent human-like beings, all of this suggests symbolic ritual meaning rather than practical function. This could imply the site was designed to express spiritual beliefs and host religious ceremonies. Third, there's evidence of feasting. Those huge amounts of animal bones we talked about earlier suggest communal meals. In many cultures, feasts are an important part of religious festivals and ceremonies. People gather, share food, participate in rituals together. The scale of feasting at Göbekli Tepe suggests it hosted major events that brought together large numbers of people. Fourth, there's the complete lack of any domestic structures. People didn't live at Göbekli Tepe. There are no houses, no permanent hearths, no storage pits for food. The only structures are the elaborate circular enclosures with their decorated pillars. This suggests the site had a special, non-everyday purpose. Based on similar patterns at ritual sites around the world, we can reasonably infer that Göbekli Tepe was set apart from ordinary life, a sacred space visited for specific purposes. If Göbekli Tepe was indeed a temple, what kind of religion did its builders practice? We can only speculate, but some researchers have proposed interesting theories based on the evidence. The prominence of dangerous animals in the carvings, snakes, scorpions, predators, has led some to suggest a focus on death and the afterlife. Perhaps Göbekli Tepe was where people came to honor the dead, to conduct burial rituals, or to connect with ancestral spirits. The headless human figures carved on some pillars support this interpretation. Others have suggested the site might be dedicated to nature spirits or animal gods. The careful observation and detailed rendering of animals could indicate these creatures were seen as sacred or as intermediaries between humans and the spiritual world. Different enclosures featuring different animals might represent different nature spirits or totems. There's also a theory that Göbekli Tepe was related to shamanic practices. Shamanism, found in many hunter-gatherer societies, involves individuals who enter altered states of consciousness to communicate with the spirit world. The elaborate and sometimes surreal imagery at Göbekli Tepe, combined with its dramatic setting, would make it an ideal location for such practices. But the temple theory isn't the only possibility. Some researchers have proposed that Göbekli Tepe had astronomical functions, serving as an ancient observatory or calendar. This theory is based on several observations. First, some of the pillars appear to be aligned with certain astronomical events. For example, some researchers have noted alignments with the rising or setting of particular stars or constellations as they would have appeared 11,000 years ago. Second, some of the carvings might represent celestial objects or star patterns. The arrangement of animals on certain pillars, when compared to star maps, shows some intriguing correspondences. Could these carvings be a kind of stone star chart? Third, tracking astronomical events would have been useful for a hunter-gatherer society. Knowing when certain stars appeared or when the seasons were changing would help them predict animal migrations, the ripening of wild plants, and the best times for hunting and gathering. An astronomical calendar carved in stone would be a valuable tool for timing these activities. However, the astronomical theory has its critics. Not all researchers are convinced by the proposed alignments. Some argue that with enough pillars and enough possible astronomical events to track, you're bound to find some coincidences. The question is whether the alignments are intentional or just the result of looking for patterns. It's worth noting that these two theories, temple and observatory, aren't mutually exclusive. Many ancient sacred sites combined religious and astronomical functions. The Maya temples in Central America, for instance, were both religious centers and astronomical observatories. Ancient peoples often saw the movements of celestial bodies as expressions of divine will, so tracking the stars was itself a religious act. There's also a more social theory about Göbekli Tepe's purpose. Some researchers propose it was primarily a gathering place, a central location where different groups could meet, trade, share information, and strengthen social bonds. In a world without cities or centralized governments, such meeting places would have been crucial for maintaining connections between groups. They would provide opportunities for young people to find marriage partners from other bands, preventing inbreeding. They would allow for the exchange of goods like special stone for tools, shells for jewelry, or knowledge about distant regions. They would enable the sharing of information about where game was plentiful or where good camping sites could be found. Building and maintaining a permanent structure like Göbekli Tepe would serve social functions itself. Working together on construction projects builds bonds between people. It creates shared experiences and shared pride and accomplishment. The site would become a symbol of cooperation, a physical representation of the connections between groups.
This social theory doesn't exclude religious or astronomical functions. In fact, religious ceremonies and astronomical observations would provide excellent occasions for social gathering. The theories can work together. Göbekli Tepe could have been primarily a religious site that also served social and astronomical functions, or primarily a gathering place where religious rituals were an important part of the activities. Another intriguing theory has been proposed by some researchers, that Göbekli Tepe was connected to the transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture. Remember, this site dates to the exact time and place where agriculture was beginning to develop. This could be more than just coincidence.
The theory suggests that the need to support the people working on and visiting Göbekli Tepe might have motivated innovations in food production. If hundreds of people were gathering at the site for extended periods, feeding them would require more reliable food sources than just hunting and gathering could provide. This pressure might have encouraged people to start managing wild plant populations more intensively, eventually leading to full agriculture. Some researchers have even suggested that wild wheat was first domesticated specifically to make beer for ceremonial feasts at sites like Göbekli Tepe. Beer making requires grain, and the process of selecting and planting the best grain-producing plants is essentially agriculture. So the desire to have beer for religious celebrations might have led to farming. This is sometimes called the beer before bread theory. There's also a more controversial theory that Göbekli Tepe might have been some kind of school or knowledge repository, a place where specialized knowledge was preserved and taught. The elaborate symbolism, the careful construction, the evidence of long-term use over centuries, all of this could suggest a place where information was passed from one generation to the next. If certain individuals in these hunter-gatherer societies had specialized knowledge about stone carving, about astronomy, about medicinal plants, about spiritual practices, they would need ways to teach that knowledge to younger people. A permanent site with symbolic representations carved in stone could serve as a teaching aid, a kind of three-dimensional textbook that would last for generations. This theory is more speculative than the others, but it's worth considering. Göbekli Tepe required sophisticated knowledge to build and maintain. That knowledge had to be preserved somehow, passed from master craftspeople to apprentices. The site itself might have been part of how that knowledge was preserved and transmitted. So what's the answer? What was Göbekli Tepe really for? The honest answer is that we don't know for certain, and we may never know the full answer. Without written records, without living practitioners of the culture that created it, we're left to infer meaning from physical remains and comparisons to other cultures. What seems most likely based on all the evidence is that Göbekli Tepe served multiple interconnected purposes. It was probably primarily a religious or ceremonial center, a sacred space set apart from everyday life. It may have had astronomical functions, helping people track the seasons and celestial events. It definitely served social functions, bringing together different groups for shared experiences. And it might have played a role in the development of agriculture, either by motivating food production or by serving as a site where new agricultural practices were developed and shared. The different theories aren't competing explanations so much as different facets of a complex reality. Ancient life wasn't neatly compartmentalized into separate categories like religion, astronomy, social gathering, and economic development. All of these aspects were interconnected, each influencing the others. What we can say with confidence is that Göbekli Tepe was important, monumentally important. People invested enormous amounts of time, energy, and resources into creating and maintaining it. They did this over generations, suggesting the site's significance endured for centuries. Whatever its exact purpose, it mattered deeply to the people who built it and used it.
Here's one of the strangest aspects of Göbekli Tepe. After using the site for perhaps 1,000 years or more, the people who built it deliberately buried it. They filled in the circular enclosures with tons of dirt and rubble, covering the pillars and effectively hiding the entire complex. This wasn't natural decay or abandonment. This was intentional burial. Let me explain what archaeologists found. As they excavated Göbekli Tepe, they discovered that the enclosures weren't just accidentally covered over time by wind-blown dust and debris. The fill material, the dirt and rocks covering the structures, was deliberately placed there. This fill contains broken stone tools, animal bones, and other artifacts, all carefully laid down to completely cover the pillars and enclosures.
The pillars themselves show no signs of toppling or destruction. They're still standing upright in their original positions, just covered up. Some of the enclosures were backfilled so carefully that the pillars were protected from damage. It's as if someone wanted to preserve the structures while simultaneously hiding them from view. This raises a fascinating question. Why would people spend generations building something extraordinary only to bury it? What possible reason could they have for hiding their own monumental achievement? Let's explore the theories researchers have proposed. One possibility is that the burial itself was a ritual act, part of the religious or ceremonial purpose of the site. In some cultures, sacred objects or places are periodically renewed or symbolically killed and then recreated. Maybe burying the enclosures was part of a cycle of death and rebirth, a ritual closing of one phase before beginning another. This theory is supported by the fact that after burying earlier enclosures, the builders created new ones nearby. It wasn't a complete abandonment, it was more like a succession with new structures replacing older ones. Based on this pattern, we might infer that each enclosure had a specific lifespan, and when that time was complete, it was ceremonially closed and a new one was opened. Think of it like a church that becomes too small or old, so the congregation builds a new one. The old church might be deconsecrated and closed, its sacred function transferred to the new building. Something similar might have happened at Göbekli Tepe, but instead of just closing the old structures, they buried them. Another theory suggests the burial might be connected to changes in belief systems or religious practices. Maybe the people's religion evolved over time, and the older structures no longer fit their new beliefs. Rather than destroy them, which might anger the old gods or spirits, they carefully buried them, showing respect while moving on to new practices. There's also a practical angle to consider. As we discussed earlier, Göbekli Tepe was built during the transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture. This was an enormous social change. As people began settling in permanent villages and relying on farming, their relationship to places like Göbekli Tepe might have changed. Hunter-gatherers are mobile. They travel through their territory, returning to the same places seasonally. For them, a central gathering place like Göbekli Tepe makes sense, but farmers are tied to their fields. They can't easily leave for extended periods. As agriculture became more established, it might have become harder for people to make the journey to Göbekli Tepe for ceremonies. This could suggest that as the society transitioned to farming, Göbekli Tepe became less central to their lives. Rather than let this sacred place fall into disrepair or be damaged by weather and time, they might have chosen to bury it, preserving it perfectly in its final state. Some researchers have proposed a more dramatic theory, that the burial was connected to some kind of catastrophe or crisis. Maybe there was a drought, a plague, or warfare that disrupted the society. Maybe the old religion was blamed for the crisis, and burying the temples was a way of starting fresh, appeasing angry gods, or breaking with a failed past. There's even a theory involving environmental change. As the climate shifted and the region became drier, the local environment would have changed. Forests might have thinned, animal populations might have shifted. These changes could have made it harder to support large gatherings at Göbekli Tepe. If the site's purpose was partly tied to hunting rituals or celebrations of abundance from the land, environmental degradation might have made those rituals seem less relevant or effective. Another angle considers the possibility of social conflict. Maybe different groups had different ideas about how Göbekli Tepe should be used or who should control it. If conflicts arose that couldn't be resolved, burial might be a compromise. No one gets to use it, so no one can fight over it. There's also a fascinating theory about memory and monumentality. By burying Göbekli Tepe, the builders created a monument that would last forever. Exposed structures deteriorate, stone weathers, carvings erode, but buried structures are protected from the elements. They remain pristine, frozen in time. Maybe they realized this. Maybe they understood that by burying their creation, they were ensuring it would endure unchanged for countless generations. In a sense, they were creating a time capsule, a message to the future. If this interpretation is correct, it suggests remarkable foresight and a sophisticated understanding of preservation. The burial also raises intriguing questions about what lies still undiscovered. Remember, only 5% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated so far. Ground-penetrating radar shows numerous additional structures still buried. Some of these might have been naturally buried over time, but others might have been intentionally covered, just like the structures we've already found. What secrets do these unexcavated structures hold? Are there enclosures even older than the ones already discovered? Are there different types of structures we haven't seen yet? Are there artifacts or carvings that might explain more about the site's purpose and the people who built it?
The decision to excavate slowly and carefully means we won't get answers to these questions quickly. But it also means that when we do uncover new structures, they'll be properly documented and preserved. The buried nature of Göbekli Tepe, whether intentional or not, has protected it for 11,000 years. Modern archaeology will ensure it's protected for millennia to come. There's something poignant about the burial of Göbekli Tepe. These people created something amazing, something that required incredible effort and represented deep meaning to them. And then they covered it up, walking away from their creation. Whether this was sad or joyful, whether it was done reluctantly or enthusiastically, we can't know. But we can imagine the last person to see the pillars before they were buried, perhaps taking one final look before the first spadeful of dirt fell. That person couldn't have known that 11,000 years later, archaeologists would rediscover what they had hidden. They couldn't have imagined that their creation would eventually become recognized as one of the most important archaeological sites in the world. They probably thought they were closing a chapter, ending something. They didn't know they were actually preserving it, protecting it, saving it for us to find. In that sense, the burial of Göbekli Tepe, whatever its original purpose, has become part of its story and part of its significance. The site speaks to us across millennia, not despite being buried, but partly because it was buried. It's a message in a bottle, hidden and preserved, waiting to be found. And we did find it. Against all odds, despite being covered for 11,000 years, despite being misidentified when first noticed, despite almost being lost forever, Göbekli Tepe emerged from the earth to challenge and change our understanding of human history.
Let's step back and look at the big picture. What does Göbekli Tepe really mean for our understanding of human history? How does it change the story we tell about where we came from and how we got here? For over a century, we had a clear narrative about the development of human civilization. It went something like this. For millions of years, humans and their ancestors lived as hunter-gatherers. Life was simple and focused on survival. Then, around 12,000 years ago, some groups in the Middle East figured out agriculture. They learned to plant seeds and grow crops, to domesticate animals and raise them for food. This agricultural revolution changed everything. With reliable food sources, people could stay in one place. They built permanent villages, then towns, then cities. Population grew because agriculture could support more people than hunting and gathering. With more people and permanent settlements, societies became more complex. Specialization developed. Not everyone had to focus on food production, so some people could become craftspeople, priests, rulers, or warriors. This social complexity led to advances in technology, art, and architecture. People built temples and monuments. They developed writing to keep records. They created sophisticated cultures with elaborate religions, detailed laws, and impressive achievements in engineering and art. That's the traditional narrative. First agriculture, then everything else follows. It makes sense. And for a long time, all the evidence seemed to support it. Göbekli Tepe breaks this narrative. This site shows monumental architecture appearing before agriculture was fully established. This evidence suggests that people organized themselves to build complex structures before they had permanent villages. Based on what we found, we can reasonably infer they practiced elaborate religious rituals before they had cities or formal governments. This is backwards from what we thought. It's like finding the second floor of a building without finding the first floor it's supposed to rest on. It challenges the foundation of our theories about human development. Klaus Schmidt and other researchers proposed a radical reinterpretation based on Göbekli Tepe and similar sites. They suggested that maybe we had the causation backwards. Maybe it wasn't agriculture that led to civilization. Maybe it was civilization, or at least the early stages of social complexity and monumental building, that led to agriculture. Here's how this could have worked. Hunter-gatherer groups in the region were already gathering for seasonal meetings, rituals, and ceremonies. These gatherings were important for maintaining social bonds, finding marriage partners, sharing information, and practicing their religion. As these gatherings became more regular and more elaborate, there was motivation to create a permanent meeting place. So they built Göbekli Tepe. But building and maintaining such a site required many people working together for extended periods. Feeding all these people stretched the limits of what hunting and gathering could provide. This created pressure to find more reliable and productive food sources. In response, people began managing wild plant populations more intensively, selecting and planting the most productive varieties. They started experimenting with keeping captured wild animals rather than just hunting them. Over time, these experiments and innovations developed into full agriculture. Once farming was established, it enabled even larger populations and more complex societies, leading to permanent villages and eventually cities. But the spark that started the whole process wasn't the discovery of agriculture. It was the social and spiritual needs that led to places like Göbekli Tepe. In this interpretation, religion or spirituality came first. The desire to gather, to worship, to create something meaningful was the driving force. Agriculture was a consequence, a solution to the practical problem of feeding the people engaged in these spiritual activities. In this interpretation, it's sometimes summarized as first came the temple, then came the city, reversing the old understanding. Or, as some researchers put it, they didn't settle down to farm, they farmed to keep building temples. This reinterpretation has profound implications. It suggests that humans aren't primarily driven by practical economic needs. Yes, we need food and shelter, but we also need meaning, purpose, connection. Our ancestors weren't just trying to survive, they were trying to create lives worth living, to build something that would outlast them, to connect with forces larger than themselves. It also elevates the role of religion and spirituality in human development. Traditional theories tended to see religion as a byproduct of settled life, something that emerged after agriculture created the surplus resources and free time to think about abstract concepts. But Göbekli Tepe suggests religion might have been the driving force all along, motivating and organizing people even before they had cities or extensive material wealth. Not all archaeologists accept this reinterpretation. Some argue that Göbekli Tepe might be exceptional, a unique case rather than a pattern. They point out that in most places, agriculture does seem to have preceded monumental architecture. The Middle East might have been special because of its unique concentration of wild grain species and easily domesticated animals, allowing an earlier development of complex society. Others suggest the relationship between agriculture and complex society is more complicated than either the old or new narrative allows. Maybe there was feedback between the two. Early agricultural experiments enabled more elaborate gatherings, which motivated further agricultural development, which enabled even more complex societies, in a gradually escalating cycle, rather than a simple one causes the other relationship. There's also ongoing debate about how fully agricultural the builders of Göbekli Tepe actually were. Some researchers argue that the distinction between hunter-gatherers and farmers isn't as clear-cut as we sometimes assume. People might have been managing wild plant populations and engaging in proto-agricultural practices for thousands of years before anyone would call them farmers. Göbekli Tepe might represent a transitional period where people were doing both, still primarily hunting and gathering, but also beginning to manipulate their environment in ways that would lead to full agriculture. Despite these debates and uncertainties, one thing is clear. Göbekli Tepe has forced us to reconsider our assumptions. It's shown that the path from hunter-gatherer to civilization was more complex, more varied, and more interesting than we thought. There wasn't one single path that all societies followed. Different groups in different places might have taken different routes to complexity.
This has implications beyond just understanding the past. It affects how we think about human nature and human societies. If our ancestors were capable of complex organization, spiritual sophistication, and monumental achievement before agriculture, then these capacities are deeply ingrained in us. The drive to create, to gather, to seek meaning, these aren't modern inventions or civilized refinements. They're core aspects of being human, present in our species for at least 11,000 years and probably much longer. Göbekli Tepe also reminds us how much we still don't know. For every question it answers, it raises 3 more. How widespread were sites like Göbekli Tepe? Were there others that haven't been found yet? Or was this truly unique? How did the knowledge and skills needed to build such structures spread from place to place? What happened to the societies that built these early monuments? The site challenges us to keep an open mind, to be willing to revise our theories when new evidence appears, and to credit ancient peoples with the full range of human capabilities. It warns against simplistic narratives and easy answers. Maybe that's the most important lesson from Göbekli Tepe. History is messy. Human development doesn't follow neat, predictable paths. People have always been creative, surprising, and capable of things we don't expect. The more we learn about the past, the more we realize how much remains to be discovered, how many assumptions remain to be questioned, and how extraordinary our ancestors truly were.
Göbekli Tepe might be the most famous and most extensively studied, but it's not alone. Since its discovery, archaeologists have found several other ancient sites in the region that share similar features. These discoveries suggest that Göbekli Tepe wasn't a bizarre anomaly, but rather part of a broader cultural phenomenon. Let's explore some of these other sites and what they tell us about the ancient world. The most similar site to Göbekli Tepe is Karahan Tepe, located about 40 miles away. This site was actually known about before Göbekli Tepe, but it wasn't properly excavated until much more recently. Like Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe features large T-shaped pillars arranged in structures. The pillars are carved with similar animal imagery and abstract symbols. What makes Karahan Tepe particularly interesting is that some of its structures are partially carved directly out of bedrock rather than being built from separate stones. This suggests a slightly different construction technique, though the overall concept is similar. Based on what archaeologists have found so far, we can reasonably infer that Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe were part of the same cultural tradition, possibly built by related groups of people. Recent excavations at Karahan Tepe have revealed some unique features not found at Göbekli Tepe. There are carved heads and faces emerging from the stone, giving some chambers an almost eerie appearance. There are also carved hands and arms, reinforcing the interpretation that the T-shaped pillars represent stylized human figures. The site appears to have been used for similar purposes as Göbekli Tepe, likely as a ceremonial or religious center. Another significant site is Navali Chori, which is unfortunately now submerged under a reservoir. Before it was flooded, archaeologists excavated enough to determine it dated to roughly the same period as Göbekli Tepe. It featured similar T-shaped pillars, though the site also included what appeared to be residential structures, suggesting it might have been a more permanent settlement than Göbekli Tepe. The discovery of domestic buildings alongside ritual structures at Navali Chori is significant. It could suggest that as these ancient societies developed, they began combining ceremonial spaces with residential areas. This might represent a transition from sites like Göbekli Tepe, which were purely ceremonial, to later settlements that integrated religion into daily life. Sayburç is another related site that has yielded fascinating discoveries. Here, archaeologists found a building with benches carved from bedrock, decorated with high-relief carvings of human figures and animals. These sculptures are remarkably detailed and sophisticated, showing the same artistic skill evident at Göbekli Tepe. The figures appear to be involved in some kind of ritual or ceremonial activity, though the exact meaning remains unclear. What's particularly striking about these sites is their geographic distribution. They're all located in the same region of southeastern Turkey and northern Syria, within a radius of about 60 miles. This suggests a shared culture, a network of related communities that shared beliefs, artistic styles, and architectural traditions. Archaeologists call this the Taş Tepeler region, which means stone hills in Turkish. Within this area, surveys have identified dozens of sites with similar characteristics. Not all have been excavated yet, but ground surveys and surface finds suggest many of them might contain structures similar to Göbekli Tepe. This raises an intriguing possibility. What if Göbekli Tepe wasn't the only major ceremonial center? What if this entire region was dotted with similar sites, each serving different groups or communities? This could imply a much more complex and interconnected society than we previously imagined. Think about it. If you have multiple ceremonial sites spread across a region, you need networks of communication. Groups need to know about each other. They might visit each other's sites. They might share techniques for construction and carving. Ideas, styles, and possibly even beliefs would spread from one site to another. Some researchers have suggested these sites might have been in competition with each other. Different groups might have tried to build more impressive structures, carve more elaborate decorations, or host more spectacular feasts. This competition could have driven innovation and creativity, pushing these ancient builders to ever more ambitious projects. Alternatively, the sites might have cooperated, with different locations serving different purposes within a shared religious or ceremonial system. Maybe Göbekli Tepe was the main center, while other sites served subsidiary roles. Or perhaps different sites were used at different times of the year, reflecting seasonal cycles or celestial events. The evidence from these sites also helps us understand technological development in the region. At some sites, we can see the evolution of construction techniques over time. Earlier structures might use rougher stones and simpler designs, while later ones show more sophisticated carving and more complex architecture. This progression suggests accumulated knowledge, with each generation building on what the previous generation learned. But here's something that should make us pause. If this region of Turkey has yielded so many significant sites, what about other regions? Are there similar ancient structures elsewhere that we haven't found yet, or that we have found but haven't properly understood? The answer is probably yes. In recent years, archaeologists have begun identifying pre-agricultural structures with some similarities to Göbekli Tepe in other parts of the Middle East. Sites in Israel, Jordan, and Syria have yielded evidence of early monumental architecture, though none quite as old or elaborate as Göbekli Tepe. One particularly interesting site is Jericho, famous for being one of the world's oldest cities. The earliest levels of Jericho, dating to around 9,500 BCE, include a massive stone tower. This tower doesn't look like the structures at Göbekli Tepe, but it represents a similar phenomenon, people investing significant effort into building something monumental before agriculture was fully established. Based on the archaeological evidence, we can infer this shows the impulse to create monumental structures was widespread in the region during this period. There are also intriguing hints of even older structures that haven't been fully investigated. In various parts of the Middle East, archaeologists have noted unusual stone arrangements or partially buried structures that might date to the same era as Göbekli Tepe. Many of these haven't been excavated because archaeological resources are limited and so many sites compete for attention and funding. This raises an exciting possibility. What if Göbekli Tepe is just the tip of the iceberg? What we've discovered so far might represent only a fraction of the monumental architecture that existed in the pre-agricultural Middle East. There might be dozens or even hundreds of similar sites still waiting to be found.
What about beyond the Middle East? Could there be similar pre-agricultural monuments in other parts of the world? This is trickier to answer. Agriculture developed independently in several regions: the Middle East, China, Mesoamerica, and other areas. In each of these regions, we see monumental architecture appearing at some point, but Göbekli Tepe remains unique in being so clearly pre-agricultural. However, that might just mean we haven't found the equivalent sites elsewhere yet. China has a long archaeological history with many unexcavated sites. Mesoamerica has dense jungle that might hide ancient structures, and large parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America remain underexplored archaeologically. It's entirely possible that as archaeological work continues around the world, we'll find other sites that challenge our assumptions about when and where monumental architecture first appeared. Göbekli Tepe has opened our eyes to what's possible. Now we need to look at other regions with fresh perspective, ready to be surprised. The broader context of Göbekli Tepe and related sites also tells us something about how knowledge and culture spread in the ancient world. These sites didn't appear out of nowhere. They represent accumulated knowledge and cultural traditions that developed over long periods. The people who built them had learned construction techniques, artistic styles, and organizational methods from earlier generations. This suggests continuity and communication across time and space. Ancient peoples weren't isolated. They moved through the landscape, met people from other groups, shared information, and learned from each other. The sophisticated culture that produced Göbekli Tepe was built on foundations we can only glimpse, developed by countless generations whose names are lost but whose contributions persist in stone. When we look at Göbekli Tepe and its sister sites as part of a broader pattern, we see a picture of the ancient Middle East that's far more complex and dynamic than the simple textbook narrative. We see networks of sites and communities connected by shared beliefs and practices. We see technological innovation and artistic achievement. We see societies capable of remarkable accomplishments even before they had cities, writing, or the other trappings of what we usually call civilization. This broader picture reinforces the main lesson of Göbekli Tepe. Our ancestors were more capable than we gave them credit for. The development of human society was more complicated than we thought, and there's still so much to learn, so many sites to discover, so many questions to answer. Each new discovery adds a piece to the puzzle. Sometimes these pieces fit together neatly, confirming our theories. Sometimes they don't fit at all, forcing us to reconsider our entire picture of the past. That's the excitement and the challenge of archaeology. Every time we think we understand, something new appears that makes us think again. Göbekli Tepe and its sister sites stand as monuments not just to the people who built them, but to the ongoing quest to understand our shared human past. They remind us that beneath our feet, buried in earth and waiting to be found, are countless stories still to be told.
Archaeologists have been excavating Göbekli Tepe for about 30 years now, but the work is far from finished. In fact, We're probably decades away from fully excavating and understanding the site. But modern technology is helping researchers learn more about what's still buried without having to dig it all up immediately. Let's talk about the tools and techniques that are revealing Göbekli Tepe's secrets. One of the most important technologies is ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. This is a tool that sends radar pulses into the ground and measures how they bounce back. Different materials reflect radar differently. Stone reflects radar differently than soil. Empty spaces create different patterns than solid earth. By analyzing these reflections, archaeologists can create images of what's buried underground without actually digging. GPR surveys at Göbekli Tepe have revealed amazing information. We now know there are at least 20 circular structures still buried at the site, compared to the 5 that have been excavated so far. Based on the GPR images, these structures appear similar to the ones already uncovered, with large T-shaped pillars arranged in circles. Some might be even larger than the structures we've seen. This discovery is both exciting and humbling. Exciting because it means there's so much more to learn. Humbling because it means everything we know about Göbekli Tepe so far comes from just a small fraction of the site. Our understanding might change significantly as more structures are excavated. But GPR isn't the only technology being used. Magnetometry surveys measure variations in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried features. Stone structures, fire pits, and other archaeological features create magnetic anomalies that can be detected from the surface. These surveys have helped identify areas of particular interest for future excavation. Three-dimensional scanning technology is also playing a crucial role. Archaeologists are creating detailed 3D models of the pillars and structures using laser scanners and photogrammetry. These digital models serve several purposes. First, they create permanent records of the site as it exists now. Stone erodes over time, especially when exposed to weather. By creating detailed 3D models, researchers ensure that even if the physical stones change, we'll always have a record of what they looked like. Second, these models allow for detailed analysis that would be difficult or impossible with the physical stones. Researchers can measure precisely, compare patterns across different pillars, and identify details that might be hard to see with the naked eye. They can also manipulate the digital models, viewing carvings from different angles or under different lighting conditions to reveal hidden details. Third, 3D models make the site accessible to researchers around the world who can't physically visit Turkey. A scientist in Japan or Brazil can examine detailed models of Göbekli Tepe's pillars from their office, contributing their expertise to understanding the site. Chemical analysis is another powerful tool. By analyzing the chemical composition of stones, researchers can determine where they came from. This helps us understand how far stones were transported and whether different structures used stone from different quarries. Chemical analysis of organic residues can also reveal what substances were present at the site. Did they burn certain plants? Did they use specific substances in rituals? Isotope analysis of animal bones found at Göbekli Tepe provides information about the local environment and climate. Different plants take up different ratios of isotopes from the environment, and these ratios are preserved in the bones of animals that ate those plants. By analyzing these isotopes, scientists can reconstruct what plants were growing in the area, which tells us about temperature, rainfall, and overall climate conditions. Satellite imagery and aerial photography, including drone surveys, provide a bird's-eye view of the site and its surroundings. These images help researchers understand the site's relationship to the broader landscape. Where are water sources? What routes would people have traveled to reach the site? How does Göbekli Tepe relate to other known archaeological sites in the region? Computer modeling is also becoming increasingly sophisticated. Researchers can create simulations of how the site might have looked in its prime, complete with reconstructed roofs or other features that no longer survive. They can model how sunlight would have fallen on the structures at different times of day or different times of year, which might reveal intentional alignments or astronomical significance.
all of these technologies are non-destructive or minimally destructive. This is important because archaeological excavation, by its nature, destroys the site as you dig through it. You can't put it back the way it was. So, modern archaeology tries to extract as much information as possible before and during excavation using techniques that don't require digging. This approach has been particularly important at Göbekli Tepe because the site is so significant. Archaeologists want to proceed carefully, excavating slowly and methodically to ensure they don't miss crucial information or damage irreplaceable features. The decision to excavate only about 5% of the site so far reflects this cautious approach. But caution brings its own challenges. There are questions that could potentially be answered quickly with more extensive excavation. For instance, are there burials at the site? So far, none have been found, but that could be because we simply haven't excavated in the right places yet. More extensive digging might reveal grave sites that would provide invaluable information about the people who built Göbekli Tepe.
Similarly, many questions about the site's chronology and how it evolved over time could be answered more definitively with more excavation. Did all the structures get built in a relatively short period, or does construction span many centuries? Did the site's purpose or use change over time? These questions will eventually be answered as excavation continues, but it will take decades. Current plans call for gradual, systematic excavation that will likely continue for the next 50 years or more. This timeline might seem frustrating, but it reflects the reality of modern archaeological practice. Better to work slowly and do it right than to rush and lose crucial information. The use of modern technology at Göbekli Tepe also raises interesting questions about the future of archaeology. As non-invasive technologies become more sophisticated, will we eventually be able to excavate sites virtually, learning almost everything about them without physically digging? This could help preserve sites for future generations while still advancing our knowledge. However, there are limits to what technology can tell us. GPR can show that something is buried, but it can't tell you exactly what it is. Chemical analysis can reveal what substances were present, but it can't tell you how people use them. Even the most sophisticated 3D scan can't capture everything about an object: its weight, its texture, how it sounds when tapped. Physical excavation will always be necessary to some degree. The key is using technology to inform excavation decisions, to help archaeologists know where to dig and what to look for, and to preserve as much information as possible from whatever is excavated. Recent seasons of excavation at Göbekli Tepe have continued to yield surprises. In 2021, researchers announced the discovery of new carvings that hadn't been previously noticed, despite being on pillars that were excavated years ago. New analysis techniques revealed these hidden images, showing that even structures we think we know well might still hold secrets. There's also ongoing work to better understand the quarry sites where the stones were cut. By studying the techniques used to extract the stone and the tool marks left behind, researchers can learn about the technological capabilities and working methods of the ancient builders. This practical knowledge helps us appreciate their achievements even more. Modern technology is also helping with conservation efforts. Göbekli Tepe has survived for 11,000 years buried underground, but now that it's exposed, it faces new threats. Weather, especially freezing and thawing cycles, can crack stones. Sunlight can degrade some types of rock. Even well-meaning visitors can cause wear simply by touching the stones. Conservators are using technology to monitor the condition of the site and develop strategies to protect it. They're testing different protective treatments and shelter designs to shield the stones from weather while still allowing visitors to see them. They're using moisture sensors and temperature monitors to track environmental conditions and predict when stones might be at risk of damage. All of this technological work serves a single purpose: to help us understand Göbekli Tepe better and preserve it for the future. Each new technique, each new analysis adds to our knowledge and helps us protect this irreplaceable window into the ancient past. The combination of traditional archaeological methods with cutting-edge technology represents the best of modern archaeology. It balances the need for careful, systematic excavation with the power of advanced analytical tools. It respects the site's significance while pushing forward our understanding. As technology continues to advance, who knows what new tools might be applied to Göbekli Tepe in the coming years? Artificial intelligence might help identify patterns in the carvings that human eyes miss. New dating techniques might provide more precise chronologies. Advanced chemical analysis might reveal traces of activities we haven't yet detected. The story of Göbekli Tepe is still being written, and modern technology is giving us new chapters all the time. Each technological advance brings us closer to understanding this mysterious and magnificent site, connecting us more deeply to the people who built it and the world they inhabited.
We've journeyed through 11,000 years of history, exploring the mysteries of Göbekli Tepe from its accidental discovery to its world-changing significance. Now let's pull everything together and think about what this remarkable site teaches us and why it matters today. First and foremost, Göbekli Tepe teaches us humility about our ancestors. For too long, we've looked at ancient peoples through a lens of superiority, assuming they were simpler, less capable, less intelligent than we are. We've imagined them as primitive, focused only on survival, incapable of the abstract thinking and complex organization that we associate with civilization. Göbekli Tepe shatters that condescending view. The people who built this site 11,000 years ago were just as human as we are. They had the same cognitive abilities, the same emotional depth, the same capacity for imagination and creativity. They dreamed big dreams and worked together to make those dreams real. They created art, practiced religion, organized large-scale projects, and built something that would outlast them by millennia. The difference between them and us isn't intelligence, it's simply accumulated knowledge and technology. We stand on the shoulders of countless generations who came before us, each contributing their discoveries and innovations. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were at the beginning of that process, working with the tools and knowledge available to them. Given those constraints, what they accomplished is even more impressive than many modern achievements. Second, Göbekli Tepe teaches us that human history is more complicated than any simple narrative can capture. We like simple stories. First this, then that, then the other thing. Cause and effect in a straight line. But real history is messy, full of surprises, false starts, dead ends, and unexpected connections. The old story of civilization, agriculture leads to settlement, leads to religion, leads to monuments, was appealingly simple, but it wasn't accurate, or at least not completely accurate. Göbekli Tepe shows us that the path from hunter-gatherer to complex society involved twists and turns we didn't anticipate. It reminds us to hold our theories lightly, to be ready to revise them when new evidence appears. This lesson applies beyond archaeology. In all areas of knowledge, we should maintain a balance between confidence in what we know and openness to being wrong. The history of science is full of theories that seemed obviously true until new evidence forced us to think differently. Göbekli Tepe is one more example of this pattern. Third, Göbekli Tepe teaches us about the power of spirituality and the human need for meaning. Whether or not the builders of Göbekli Tepe had the same kind of religion we recognize today, they clearly had beliefs and practices that were important enough to motivate extraordinary effort. They didn't build these structures because they had to. They built them because they wanted to, because it mattered to them, because it gave their lives meaning and purpose. This speaks to something fundamental about being human. We're not just survival machines, we're meaning-making creatures. We need more than food and shelter. We need purpose, connection, transcendence. We need to feel part of something larger than ourselves. These needs aren't a luxury that appears only after all practical needs are met. They're core to who we are as a species, present even in our most ancient ancestors.
In our modern world, where material comfort and technological sophistication can sometimes feel hollow, Göbekli Tepe reminds us that humans have always sought meaning beyond mere survival. The builders of Göbekli Tepe had hard lives by our standards, yet they found time and motivation to create something beautiful and meaningful. That's a lesson worth remembering. Fourth, Göbekli Tepe teaches us about the importance of cooperation and community. Building those massive stone circles required people to work together on an unprecedented scale. They had to trust each other, coordinate their efforts, and sustain their collaboration over extended periods. The site itself might have served as a gathering place that strengthened bonds between different groups, creating networks of cooperation that spanned the region. This capacity for large-scale cooperation is one of humanity's superpowers. It's enabled everything from ancient monuments to modern technology. Göbekli Tepe is an early example of what humans can accomplish when they work together toward a shared goal. In our own time, when many of the world's challenges require global cooperation, this ancient lesson feels particularly relevant. Fifth, Göbekli Tepe teaches us that there's still so much to discover. Despite all our advances in science and technology, despite centuries of archaeological exploration, we're still finding sites that completely surprise us and change our understanding of the past. Göbekli Tepe was hiding in plain sight for thousands of years, waiting to be properly understood. What else is out there, still undiscovered? What other sites might rewrite our understanding of history? What other achievements of ancient peoples are still buried, still unknown? The past is not a closed book. It's an ongoing mystery with new chapters being revealed all the time. This should fill us with wonder and excitement. It means there are still discoveries to be made, still questions to be answered, still surprises waiting. For young people thinking about their futures, archaeology and related fields offer the chance to literally uncover secrets that have been hidden for millennia. Sixth, Göbekli Tepe teaches us about the importance of preserving and studying our cultural heritage. This site survived for 11,000 years only because it was buried, protected from the elements and from human interference. Now that it's exposed, it's vulnerable. Climate change, pollution, tourism, and even well-meaning but careless study can damage irreplaceable sites. We have a responsibility to protect places like Göbekli Tepe, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. Who knows what questions people 100 or 1,000 years from now might want to ask about this site? What technologies might they have that could reveal things we can't see yet? By preserving Göbekli Tepe, we're keeping options open for our descendants, ensuring they'll have the same opportunity to learn from the past that we have. Finally, Göbekli Tepe teaches us to question our assumptions and stay curious. The site was misidentified for decades because archaeologists assumed that people from that period couldn't have built such structures. Once Klaus Schmidt questioned that assumption and looked at the evidence with fresh eyes, the truth became clear.
How many other assumptions do we make without realizing it? What else might we be missing because we think we already know the answer? Staying curious, asking questions, challenging conventional wisdom, these attitudes are essential, not just in archaeology, but in all areas of life. So what should you take away from the story of Göbekli Tepe? Here are the key points. Our ancestors were remarkable, capable people who deserve our respect and admiration. Human history is complex and full of surprises, not a simple straight-line progression. The human need for meaning and spirituality is ancient and fundamental. Cooperation and community have always been essential to human achievement. There's still so much to discover about our past. We have a responsibility to preserve and protect our cultural heritage. Questioning assumptions and staying curious leads to amazing discoveries. Göbekli Tepe stands today as it has for 11 millennia, silent but eloquent, mysterious but revealing. It connects us to our distant ancestors, reminding us that the human spirit, creative, ambitious, seeking meaning, is timeless. The people who built those massive stone circles are gone, but what they created remains, speaking to us across the vast gulf of time.
Every time archaeologists uncover a new pillar, every time researchers analyze a new carving, every time technology reveals a new secret about the site, we come a step closer to understanding not just Göbekli Tepe, but ourselves. Because this site, built at the dawn of civilization, tells us something profound about what it means to be human. Before we end, I want to hear from you. What aspect of Göbekli Tepe fascinates you most? Do you think the builders were primarily motivated by religion, astronomy, social needs, or something else? What other ancient mysteries would you like me to cover in future videos? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss future videos. Give this video a like if you learned something new, and consider sharing it with anyone who loves history, archaeology, or just amazing stories about our ancient past. Thank you for joining me on this journey to Göbekli Tepe. The past is full of wonders waiting to be discovered, and I'm excited to explore more of them with you. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and never lose your sense of wonder about the incredible story of humanity.